This is Strike, the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast with a British twist. As always, I'm your host, P-Dubs, and to start the new year with a bang, we've been teasing over the last week or so that we had something special for the Punisher fans out there. We have actually got a special guest, and the interview will be coming up right now. So, as I said at the top of the show, we do have a very special guest joining us on the show tonight. From Netflix and Marvel's hit series The Punisher, the man who brought Sam Stein to life, Michael Nathanson. Thank you for joining us, Michael.
All right. Good to be here, gentlemen. Thanks for having me.
No worries.
Good evening.
We are joined by Tony as well, my co-host.
Greetings.
The rest of the team couldn't join us tonight. They're both working. So we're going to go straight into the interview. Obviously, we brought you on to talk about The Punisher, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about your career before The Punisher came along. So you had a string of guest appearances in massive network shows, starting with Law & Order back in 2009, through 30 Rock, Rescue Me, The Good Wife and Elementary. Are there any of those experiences that stand out for you that kind of put you in the direction you wanted to be in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a really weird sort of journey to The Punisher, where I was a big theater guy for a really long time. I did a ton of New York theater, regional theater all over the country, and even toured around with The Lion King for a while here in the States, and started doing more commercials and TV work and getting into more of that kind of stuff, which is always kind of what I really wanted to do. But you know, you go to drama school, you train to be kind of a theater actor. That's kind of what happens, and you fall in love with Shakespeare and all sorts of stuff. And that was kind of my track. But yeah, when I started doing more guest spots and more commercials, and realized it was really my calling to be on screen. And I don't know if I could pinpoint one of those particular experiences that really sort of changed the trajectory of my career. I mean, I would say the movie that kind of launched me into I kind of had two on-camera experiences, I would say, that kind of launched me into a more clearer direction to where I am now. One was a short film that I starred in called Time Freak, which ended up getting nominated for an Academy Award. And that was a particularly kind of amazing experience. I got to travel all to different festivals. I got to go to the Oscars. I got to, experience what that was like. I got to, meet a lot of filmmakers and producers and actors and be interviewed all over the place. And that was kind of insane. And then, a lot of that led to my relationship with Steven Soderbergh and working with him on a few projects. And so I would say those experiences were really like sort of the keystones for it all kind of builds. Everyone says you're an overnight success after you work for whatever, 10, 15 years. But all those actors are working, doing guest spots, doing theater, doing commercials, doing indie film. They're making a living. I've been a working actor for a really long time, making a living, exclusively as that. And so, this is sort of like my reward for all the hard work, is to be on a show that's this visible and this exciting, and sort of to be able to reach, millions of fans all over the world, so quickly, and kind of bring, my personality and what I do and my acting style to them. It's just going to open so many more doors for me. But, it's just like one little door opens another door, a bigger door, and then it just then you kind of find yourself here. But it's a lot of work, man, a lot of years, for sure.
The second kind of TV experience that I wanted to bring up was your appearance on Orange is the New Black, which was your first move into the Netflix, kind of model. Did it feel very different to being on like a network show to moving on to a Netflix show?
I think all of these shows they're really all kind of the same bag. I mean, I actually talked to somebody on another podcast about this, and they were curious kind of like how the network shows and the sort of streaming shows differ in terms of, just filming and stuff. And really the only difference is, on the streaming shows, it's a longer period of time that you're working on it. So it's almost like a 10-hour movie, that just kind of keeps going and going and going. A network show, they got to run and gun that stuff. They got to get that done super fast, because, they have episodes that have to air, within a month or so, and they have a timeline. for a season. In terms of streaming stuff, they can throw that stuff up whenever they want. They want to film it all at once and then decide when to release it all at once. So I would say the biggest difference between filming on a streaming show and filming on a network show is really just, on a streaming show, everyone is in it for the long haul. And on a network show, everyone wants to go home every day. Really, really quickly, and there's a lot of that sort of, okay, let's not do too many takes and not that that's not like how it is everywhere, but, excuse me. It's, I would say that's the biggest difference. And I really didn't feel any difference going from, and also like, I've done plenty of indie films and I've done bigger studio films and, it all kind of is the same bag. I approach it the same. I don't think of it as any difference. And it really has more to do with the crew than the actors, I would say. We kind of do our thing whenever we can. But yeah. Does that answer the question? Was that a good answer? I don't know.
That was fantastic. We don't get to see a lot of this, obviously being in the UK as well. We don't see so much of the behind the scenes stuff as maybe people that live in the States do. So that's fantastic. Moving on from that.
But I would say my dream is to be in a BBC show or like, here's the thing, I was talking to my co-star Amber, my dear friend Amber Rose Reva, who plays, Dean Madani on the show, and we, I actually have a TV pilot that I co-wrote that we're pitching around currently, and it's an 8-episode arc, and, I think the 8-episode arc of any TV show is the right way to go. I like the 8-episode arc, or the 6 to 8 episode arc, and then the 2 to 3 season max, and then you're out. Tell a great story and get the hell out. And I think that's what the Brits do remarkably well. So your model to me is how things should be done. I don't know what our model is to be modeled after, but I hope we model more stuff after yours.
So moving on from the small screen stuff, after that you moved on to the massive box office hit and critically acclaimed movie The Wolf of Wall Street. How was that experience?
Yeah, that was interesting. I mean, over the course of a year and a half, I did a bunch of stuff, but 2 big projects were that, and I did this big movie Side Effects for Steven Soderbergh, where I first met him and developed a relationship with him, and getting to work with arguably the 2 best directors in the world, kind of back to back, was very intimidating and very insane. Wolf of Wall Street, I didn't have a huge role in Wolf of Wall Street. I think I filmed a total of about a week on that movie. Some of my stuff got cut and I ended up in the movie in a few scenes. And, I told the story. There was a moment on that set where I was having a conversation. I was standing in between Leonardo DiCaprio and Martin Scorsese, and I was in the middle, and there's DiCaprio on one side, smoking an e-cig and kind of furrowing his brow and a sort of James Dean look. And then I had Scorsese on my right, chattering away like exactly how you think Martin Scorsese directs and talks to actors is exactly how he directs and talks to actors. Telling me about my character background and all this stuff. And I definitely had an out-of-body experience where I was sort of ping-ponging between them and then being like, wow, I really need to take a mental note that this is where I am currently, and it has to only get as good or better than this going forward. So that was one of those moments where I was like, yeah, this is weird. This is surreal. I guess this is what happens when you sort of open that bigger door into bigger projects with these kinds of people, and you find yourself, and they're actors and directors like everyone else, but, and you kind of have to suck it up and be like, okay, I'm here for a reason, I got cast and I'm good and I'm talented. Don't mess it up. Don't screw it up. And don't second guess yourself. But, yeah, it was super fun. I got to meet a lot of cool people on that shoot, and, at one point got to improvise with Rob Reiner, which was kind of insane because this is one of my favorite movies of all time. And, there was a scene where Scorsese was just like, okay, you guys just kind of improvise such and such. And, we did that. And yeah, that was amazing. So yeah.
I was going to ask Michael, sorry, what's the difference in the style between Soderbergh and Scorsese would you say is a significant one?
Well, there's there's 2 significant ones, I would say, that come to mind. One is very verbal and one is not at all. And I'll let you guess who is who.
Yeah.
It's, every director has a very different style. And I think that I respond to most director styles. Like I find myself a fairly affable person, and I can kind of do my thing within the context of whatever's going on. But, those are two very different experiences. Scorsese loves to talk about backstory, talk about the details of the scene, talk about every motivation and intention, and really dive into the psychology of moment to moment what's going on, and really have it all as clearly mapped out and detailed as possible before he shoots. And, he also takes a much longer time to set up and to light and to, just kind of, move actors and set pieces around. And he generally works with much bigger budgets as well. On the other hand, Soderbergh he has a thing, he's a very trusting director. He has a very quiet calm about him. I think I saw him get angry once, and it wasn't even a voice raising. It was just sort of like an internalized sort of anger, but he's never very calm. He's a kind of one-man band. He holds the camera, he edits the movie or the TV show, whatever it may be. He helps some of the writing, he produces, he directs, and so he runs the show, and he makes sure that kind of everything is a very tight ship and is very, what you see is what you get. You get to set, everything's done, you're ready to shoot almost immediately, and then you get to go home early. And he doesn't like to give a lot of notes, and he doesn't like to do a lot of takes. And so in a situation like you're working with someone like Scorsese, I think you have more, he gives you more tools with which to work with, and I think sometimes that helps, and sometimes it's a little too much. And with Soderbergh, I think I responded really well to him in the sense of like, he trusted me, he gave me a lot of rope, he gave me a lot of freedom, he creates very safe, comfortable spaces, and you kind of develop an almost telekinesis with him, and how in terms of what he wants you to do and what you think he needs you to do within the context of what he's creating. And that's the best way I can describe it.
No, cool. Cheers.
So, sticking with The Wolf of Wall Street, you obviously got to work with your future co-star, Jon Bernthal, was also in the film. Did you know Jon at that point, or wasn't it until you worked on The Punisher that you actually knew him?
No, we never got to really work together. We were on set a couple times together, but we never worked together. So I didn't meet him. The first time I ever met Jon Bernthal was at the Marvel Training Center, which is in an undisclosed location somewhere in New York City, where they work all of us out, and we learn a lot of the firearms stuff, and we train our bodies and learn a lot of hand-to-hand combat and stuff like that. The first time I ever met Jon face to face and sort of shook his hand he was heavily bearded, shirtless, long hair, and doing lots of very intense workouts, getting into, pre-filming for The Punisher last year, and very intimidating until he opens his mouth and he's like the sweetest guy in the whole world. But that was the first time I actually really got to know him and became friendly with him. Was on The Punisher. That's
great. Moving back to TV again, you then got a reoccurring role that turned into a permanent role on The Nick with Clive Owen. Did you feel that things had changed at that point, having done a couple of big movies and things like that when you moved on?
Yeah, well, I had not been a series regular in a show yet. I had done a ton of guest spots, and I was kind of ready to be on a TV show. I had actually done a TV pilot for CBS the year before with Deborah Messing and some other famous folks, where I was playing this sort of comic relief, and it was this huge pilot that everyone thought was going to be Deborah Messing's like next show after Will and Grace. Ended up not getting picked up. But I was like in the best spot possible to really start to get a bigger role on a TV show. And yeah, after working with Steven on Side Effects, they called me up and they were like, look, we have this role. We kind of had you in mind from the get-go when we started thinking about it, and they just offered it to me, and it was kind of insane. I didn't audition. They just brought me on, and I thought the character would have a bigger life in the second season, and ended up having a much bigger life in the second season, but and actually would have had a bigger life in the third season, unfortunately. And I know a lot of people have said we want a third season of The Nick really badly, but nobody should hold their breath. Yeah, it was cool. I was ready for it, and it was that was an amazing experience. That was like that was as close to working with someone like Stanley Kubrick I think I would ever get to do. Stanley Kubrick being like my absolute favorite filmmaker of all time. Steven works in a very technical way, and he uses a lot of natural lighting, and he uses a lot of interesting, framing devices, and it's very run and gun, and it's very, it's an out of body experience working with him. It's really awesome. I think I used that term already, but I'm going to use it again. He's an amazing director. He's very, like I said, he's very trusting. He's very cool. It's funny, I've told the story. Clive Owen had a similar experience to me where he didn't understand why Soderbergh wasn't giving him notes. He kind of felt like, what am I doing here? And, it was just, and it reminded him of a story that Robert Altman told him once when he was working on Gosford Park. Or actually what happened was Clive Owen was on Gosford Park, his first big American film. Robert Altman wasn't giving him any notes or any sort of feedback. He finally, got the cojones to go over to him and say, hey, just to make up some questions so he could get some feedback, just to get some confidence back in his performance. And Altman's response to him was, 95% of my job is casting. And so I like to think that that's a compliment, like they cast you, you show up, you do your job, you go home. And if you're there for a reason, and you just sort of like, you do your thing, and you're confident, and you make some good choices, and hopefully people like it until they tell you they don't. And if they don't tell you anything, you're in good shape.
So let's move on to...
It's a bit like This Is Your Life. I like the way you're doing. And then you did this. I'm going to jump out of my closet like my dead grandmother jumped out of my closet. Oh. I didn't realize she was here. Fantastic. You flew her up from hell. Okay.
So, moving on to the Punisher, I'm going to point out here that there probably will be spoilers at this point if you haven't seen the show. First of all, what are you doing? Secondly, go and watch it now. Let's start... Let's start at the beginning. Frank had obviously been really popular in season 2 of Daredevil. We were huge fans from the off, and really wanted the show to go ahead. Were you a fan of the series that had been on the Netflix Marvel stuff before?
Yeah, totally. I watched the Daredevil shows, when they first came out, and, I was a huge fan of Bernthal's work on Daredevil season 2. He was amazing. I had no, I think everybody kind of assumed that the Punisher would come out in a series with John Bernthal. The Punisher, I think everyone loves Daredevil for sure. There's a lot of fan love for that character, but in that whole sort of TV universe, I think everyone was like, well, when are we going to get to the Punisher? Because I don't think it's ever really been done justice until now. And I think when he came along and did that character in season 2 of it was like, oh, finally, like a Punisher we can all be proud of. And so, yeah, I was excited to see if they were going to do a Punisher. I kind of had a feeling. And then when the audition came along, I was like, wow, this could be pretty amazing to be a part of this show. And so, yeah, I was, and such a fan of his work. And I'm a big Walking Dead fan, and I've been a fan of John since season 1 of Walking Dead. And so, yeah, he's just, he's the greatest.
And talking of the process of being cast, how was it? Because Marvel are very well known for being very secretive, and not telling anybody what's going on until they literally have to tell them. How was it for you when you were going through the process of being cast?
Well, I had an audition. I left my house. I got hit in the head with a rubber hose and thrown into a burlap bag into the back of a van. I'm waiting for someone to laugh. There you go. That was a joke. I had some idea that this was a Marvel I knew it was a Marvel show. I didn't know it was definitely the Punisher. I had a feeling it was under a pseudonym, when they gave us the sides. I had dummy sides. They weren't actually anything that was from the show. And it was a scene between 2 FBI partners on a rooftop staking a criminal out, and having a conversation about why they joined the FBI. And I remember in the audition I had a monologue about 9/11, and that was the reason that my character, at least within the context of this scene they gave me, had joined the FBI. And it was a very sort of intense, poignant monologue about what 9/11 did to New York and how it inspired this particular person to join law enforcement. And, yeah, I mean, I kind of had a wink from the cast director whom I knew pretty well that this was, you know, one of the Marvel shows, and she was kind of like, you can kind of figure it out. And I was like, okay. And we kind of smiled at each other. And, you know, I hadn't read a script or anything. I literally got like a 5-page scene and that was it. And, you know, I came in. The funniest part of all of this was before that audition, I had actually auditioned for Micro, which most people don't know. And, you know, I think at that point they were thinking a little bit more about going with maybe what the comic book Micro was more about. I think they ended up doing something a bit different with the character, which I thought worked out great. I never thought that there would be two characters that I could potentially play in a Marvel show in the same season. That was kind of insanely lucky. But, the first scene I read, which was the Micro scene, again, under different character names, different script name, hadn't read a script, it was a scene. That was when I had my first inkling. And then when this other scene came along, I was like, okay, if this is law enforcement going after these other guys, it definitely seems like it could be a Punisher spinoff. And so, yeah, I had the audition and, didn't hear anything for like 3 months, and then got a phone call and was like, yeah, you're the guy and they're hiring you. And, it was and the whole casting process, or the whole, I should say, process from then on into filming was extremely, extremely secretive. There were like, you know, different passwords and portals. I had to go online to get scripts and sides, and, you know, all the meetings are very secretive, and we couldn't talk about anything to anybody. And it was tough. I couldn't tell anybody I was on the Punisher. That was the hardest thing. I couldn't brag to any of my comic book nerd friends that, like, oh my God, I can't believe like I'm in the MCU right now and I can't tell anybody. That was insane. That absolutely killed me. But yeah, no, it's very secretive, and they're very, very clear about it. And there's a lot of training about how secretive it is. And they're like, no joke, you know, you guys, you know, you have to sign about 10 different documents to say, like, if you blab, then, you know, you're in deep, you know what. So, yeah, for sure.
So, let's get into the story a little bit. Fairly early on, that Sam and Dina are fairly separate from Frank's story. And it isn't until later on in the series that they kind of start crossing paths. Was the filming process like that? Were you filming a lot away from the other half of the story, or were episodes being filmed concurrently and things like that? Were you a separate team as such?
No, they filmed all the episodes in chronological order. And they generally didn't move on to another. Sometimes they would overlap depending on schedules. And they would go on for the next episode and film some scenes from the next episode with certain actors, and then go back and finish the previous episode with different actors, and different storylines, because all the storylines were so kind of disparate. But no, it's, you know, they generally have two crews. They have an A and B crew, same DP, a lot of the same crews, but like different, assistant directors, different first assistant directors, different second assistant directors, and different directors for almost every single episode. But no, you know, because the storylines were so separate, we often didn't see each other except in passing, a lot of the actors. And then sometimes we would get together socially for a dinner or for drinks. But yeah, it was, and it was pretty relentless. I mean, they filmed 13 episodes over the course of, well, I guess we started in like beginning of October and they ended beginning of April. So what is that, like not even 6 months? October, November, December, January, February, March. Wow. Yeah, it's like a little over 6 months they shot 13 episodes. So it was a lot, you know, it was a lot. Everyone was pretty tired all the time. And I think because the storylines were all over the place, there was some confusion. It's like, oh my God, wait, now we're at night. Now it's morning. Now we're with these guys. Now we're at Homelands. Now we're at Frank's, you know, now we're at the battle van and we're in the, you know, Micro's lair. And now we're in the suburbs. And now we're, you know, it was, yeah, it was crazy. But, you know, those of us who sort of had our own sort of specific storylines, for us, it was fairly linear, and we kind of just told our stories and moving forward.
So I was going to bring up the fact that the Punisher seemed a very, very different beast compared to a lot of the other stuff that Marvel TV have touched on. I would call it more of a political thriller than a comic book series. And I think that's something that fits in with how the world is today. Is that how it felt to you as well while you were filming it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I have no frame of reference for what it feels like before this to film sort of like a comic book show. I mean, there were times when I would wander into Micro's set, or I would go check out the battle van, or I would go see, there would be sort of these emblematic, iconic things around me. So I was like, whoa, this is really cool. And I'm a huge sort of geeky fanboy. So for me, it was like really a neat thing to see. But, yeah, it really didn't, I mean, Frank's not a superhero per se. He's got no special powers. There's nothing sort of mystical or, it's in the same universe as the Avengers. It's in the same universe as Daredevil and Iron Fist and all of these other things that have supernatural elements to them, or superpowered kind of elements to them. But yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's so incredible about Frank's story is that it's the one kind of superhero that doesn't have any powers, and really it's in a lot of ways the most human story. It's certainly the most painful story, I think, in any comic book in history, in terms of a backstory, in terms of sort of the raison d'etre of the whole piece. But, yeah, at no point did it feel like anything other than sort of like an intense political action thriller movie that we were making. And it kind of harkens back to a lot of sort of 70s stuff like Alan J. Pakula, kind of like All the President's Men. To me, it was kind of like The French Connection meets All the President's Men. That's kind of how it felt like filming it for me. I think that's where my character kind of lived. It had a very sort of 70s kind of washed out sensibility in terms of how it looks, sort of the colors, the colorscape, the claustrophobic framing, the kind of intimate framing, the characters in the frame and all that kind of stuff, and that jazz, and how a lot of the action sequences were filmed. There's that. It's a throwback show in a lot of ways. And I think getting to the roots of, what a superhero is, and that, in essence, what it means to be where we come up with the notion of superhero. And I think it's the most sort of, grassroots or sort of ground up kind of example of that. And so, yeah, it definitely felt like more of that than the other, for sure.
So, I think we have to touch on it. Sadly, Sam does get killed off in episode 8. Yeah, exactly. Were you aware that was the way the story was going to go right from the start?
Yes. No surprises. Nobody ruined my day or my month or my year by telling me. Although it's funny, at the read through of that episode, most of the cast did not know that happens. And so when we got to it, you could see people like visibly shook up by it. Because I generally was a bit of a class clown on set, and at the read throughs and, I'm not so far away from that character. There's a lot of heavies on that show, and I tried to sort of keep it light in a lot of ways. And I think people were viscerally upset that was going on. And then what's funny is I pretended like I didn't know either. And when it came up in the script and they started reading the stage directions, I stood up and I screamed, "Are you kidding me?" Or some ridiculous thing. And half the room knew I was joking, and half the room was like, "Oh my God, they didn't tell him." And, that was amazing. I patted myself on the back for that moment. And then I was like, I knew everybody. I knew. Calm down.
I was going to say, we should have seen it coming there, because if there is one thing in the formula, it's that shocking demise of a character. I'm thinking of Cottonmouth in Luke Cage as well.
Yep.
And they always seem to pull the rug out with one of the characters like that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what they told me in the beginning. They were like, we want to take the character that people are going to love the most and kill him. And I was like, oh, I take that as a compliment. And they were like, they felt like that needed to happen in order to set the last sort of the final act of the season in motion, the third act of the season in motion. And my death hangs over the rest of the season, and it becomes pretty emblematic for everybody. And it's very, not dissimilar from like, and I've told this to people before, I feel like I'm in a lot of ways the sort of Obi-Wan to the show, especially to Amber's character. And when Obi-Wan dies in Star Wars, it's like, did that really just happen? People are just like, what? It's really upsetting, but also like it needed to happen. And I accepted that, I think, early on, that story-wise, it was the right thing to do. And it helped the story tremendously. It was a bummer for me. I'm not going to lie. I wasn't like excited that I wasn't going to be able to continue with it, but there's so many great things that came out of it in terms of like, the worst thing I could do would be an annoying character that lingered on for a couple of seasons. Instead, I get, a sort of one of the great deaths of all time in a Marvel show or movie. Some people said that was the best episode of the series. I'm not going to say that I'm not going to disagree or agree. but I would say that like it really had a profound effect on people. And I'll tell you, I get hundreds of messages a day on social media with crying emojis and with hearts and why did they kill you? Why did you have to die? And, they did you wrong and that shouldn't have happened. And in a lot of ways, I'm like, yeah, of course, I feel like I would love to continue with the show, but also like, well, then I did my job, right? Not only did the writers did their job, the show did its job, I did my job. My character had a profound effect on people. People really loved him. I think he represented a lot of the love and humanity on that show, and the humor, certainly. And, when you lose that, and I think everyone experiences that kind of a loss in their lives. It's inevitable. It's an important, profound thing to experience. And I think, it's not a bad thing to be martyred in the MCU. Like, I don't know. I take that with a huge badge of honor. I was talking to one of the guys who are on, Ming from Comic Book Men, those guys who did the AMC show. And I've gotten a little bit friendly with Ming, and he sent me a really nice message on social media, which was basically just like, we're big fans of yours, and you got like, such an iconic death. You should be so honored and proud. And I was like, oh, cool. I've been sort of badge of honor by the fans. So, there's a good side to this and a bad side to this, but, you're never quite dead in the MCU. I was
going to say, you could always go to Tahiti, I suppose.
Yeah, man. Or,
it's a magical place.
I think Coulson said. Yeah, right. I think there's a great prequel for Sam, right? Like, what did Sam do before Dina came along? Like, maybe Sam and the Hulk had some fun times together. Maybe they were army buddies. I don't know. And, I think that there's room for, look, I have nothing to spoil because no one has said to me, oh, we want to bring Sam back in some kind of other realm or in some supernatural way. I would not, anyone get their hopes up about that, but, I do have something in the works that involves Marvel, which I can't really talk about yet, but, needless to say, people will be hearing from me again, for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, on that note, I wanted to talk about Marvel a little bit more in general and the setup. The collaboration between Marvel and Netflix, it's kind of a different thing because Netflix tend to produce their own stuff, whereas Marvel are obviously producing this. Is there a noticeable collaboration between the two?
Well, it's really a Netflix show. More than anything, I would say Netflix has probably the final say on kind of what transpires. It's not totally clear, I would say, from our point of view as actors in the show. It is a collaboration. But, I think their models for their content or for what they're trying to do with their brands are very different. And they found kind of a sweet spot where they can kind of scratch each other's backs and help each other out. Marvel not having, obviously a TV platform, and then Netflix obviously having all platform, and so looking for content. So I think there is very much a collaboration. I mean, I will tell you on set, there were execs from Marvel TV and execs from, Netflix all the time. Occasionally there'd be one or the other, but most of the time there was both. And there were definitely notes given from both sides. And so, yeah, I would say it's for sure a collaboration. I think it's interesting to think of what's going to happen, now that, that Disney bought Fox and Disney starting their own streaming service, what's going to happen in the future? Who knows? in terms of the partnership between Marvel and Netflix. I don't know how long of a shelf life these Marvel TV shows have necessarily. I think I read that Punisher is the last one they're going to do, in terms of like, another standalone kind of show. And I think a lot of the stuff might go to Disney. A lot of the Marvel stuff might go to a Disney platform. So who knows? That collaboration could conceivably end at some point. But yeah, so they're pretty simpatico. And there was never sort of like Marvel wants this and Netflix wants this. They have sort of like they have a machine that churns this stuff out, and they do it well, and they know what they're doing at this point.
And sticking with collaborations, obviously the movie studios and the TV side of things at Marvel are kind of separate entities. With obviously Kevin Feige in charge of the movies and Jeff Loeb steering the ship for the TV side. Does it seem like they are still working together to kind of steer both sides into the same spots, or do they seem like they are kind of working separately?
I mean, I would say just as a viewer, they seem to be working pretty separately. There was never any talk of the movies coming into play. There's a couple of references, I think, even in The Punisher, to things that had happened in like the Avengers movie, the first one. I think someone said something about the thing that happened in New York, or like the event in New York, something like that. I don't think it was
the incident comes up, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I don't think it was my character, but I think there's like very, very sort of subtle references to certain sort of bigger events that have happened, because I mean, you can't be, if you are in the same universe, you can't like not acknowledge that there was this like gigantic supernatural war that like destroyed, a portion of New York City. So, but that being said, yeah, I think that they do work autonomously. I think that they are their own things. I mean, they're definitely, the tones are different. The looks are different. They're more auteurish, right? In a sense.
Yeah.
And look, Joss Whedon, who I actually got to meet and hang out with this year, who's super cool. He's, what he did with Avengers is sort of geeky auteurish in a way, but I think in general, that's a different bag. And again, they're getting more and more sort of real with these shows, especially with Punisher. And so I think that keeping those brands separate, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point there was some kind of crossover, but I think that like at some point the crossover just becomes sort of nauseating, and you want to sort of like tell different stories and doesn't all have to connect to the same thing. If you know that it's in the same universe, you can just sort of acknowledge that and then move on and then tell like specific stories, which I personally think is just more interesting. I'm not clamoring to see like all the Defenders in an Avengers movie. I just don't see that being necessary.
So
that's just my sense.
So the last question, and this is more touching on, I know you've got a really geeky side. I've seen some of the pictures on your Twitter account, like your picture as a Ghostbuster the other day, and I know you toured Marvel today, or in the last couple of days, posted some pictures with a Hulk bust.
I'm not going to tell you when I can't tell you when I was at Marvel. It wasn't the last couple of days, but yeah, I'm being very sneaky on my Twitter and my Instagram.
And something that you've already brought up just a few moments ago, the Fox deal.
Yeah.
With the X-Men and the Fantastic Four hopefully returning to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I know, obviously, we've touched on that you're not going to be in Season 2, or probably aren't going to be in Season 2, but were there any characters that are coming back into the fold that you would have liked to have seen Sam interact with?
Oh my god. Like for other characters from other universes?
Yeah, from like the X-Men or the Fantastic Four, or even any of the other characters that are already in the MCU.
Oh my god. I don't know where would I actually begin that conversation? Everybody?
You already mentioned the Hulk, so
yeah. I mean, I love all of these characters. Like, I'm a big Marvel fan, and so I mean, any of those would have been cool. I'm a huge X-Men fan, so like, I would say if I could choose any sort of, corner of the universe to interact with, I would probably say X-Men, just because I love the story, I love the metaphor of the X-Men, I love what it says about our society, and again, it's sort of it's this brilliant series, comic series, and those characters are just incredible, and Logan was so incredible, and yeah, I love those characters, and so, oh man, it would be amazing. It'd be amazing to be hanging out with Tony Stark in his penthouse, and I don't know. My God, all of them. I'll say every single character that I end up posting, you'll just assume that I want to be in a movie with one of those guys.
So, finally, just want to say, is there anything that you've got coming up that you'd like to just give a mention to, or anything that's coming out that you've got?
Well, I was on this past season of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on Amazon, so check that out. I think it's episode 6 where my character appears. It's coming back for a second season. I don't know if I'm coming back. I'm hoping that my character comes back. So that's been a cool show to be a part of. I have an episode of Madam Secretary coming out next month, that I am a big guest spot on, which is a pretty cool gig to be on CBS. Yeah, I got some writing projects. I'm pitching around a TV pilot with a friend of mine about dads in Brooklyn, which is what I am, a dad in Brooklyn. So not too far-fetched. I got a sci-fi relationship feature that's kind of a cross between The Lobster and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind that we're trying to pitch around and trying to get some money for, and talking to some different directors. And so if anyone has $1 million that they'd like to give me to make this incredible movie, I'm happy to do the script, and you can help us make it. Yeah, a couple other projects. I got something going on with Marvel that I can't talk about, but when I can, I'm happy to come back and chat with you guys about it for sure.
Great.
And,
brilliant.
Yeah, just gonna be auditioning for more stuff, hopefully. A lot of doors have opened for me, and going to a lot more Comic-Cons. I'm really excited, and I got my first Comic-Con that I've ever been to as a guest, and that's next week. It's in Miami, Florida at Paradise City Comic-Con.
Cool.
So, if anyone in the UK wants to take a vacation to some nicer weather, although I thought it was snowing in Florida yesterday, so I don't know how nice it is down there at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah.
With I do a lot of running, and Disney have actually got their half marathon in Orlando, their full marathon in Orlando this weekend, and it was -1 in Orlando this morning when they started.
Crazy.
So, yeah.
It is something. Yeah. No, but there's no global warming.
No.
Yeah. But yeah, I got another Comic-Con coming up in Pensacola in February, and hopefully we'll be adding to that list. But yeah, I'd love, look, I would just say in closing with you guys, like, the coolest thing about being a part of the show and being in the Marvel universe has been interacting with the fans and getting to talk to guys like you in podcasts and messaging back and forth with folks online. It's really, I feel like I've really found like this sort of new family, of sort of fellow geeks and fans. And, as I like to say, I like to represent the fans. I'm one of them. I geek out over Star Wars, over Marvel, over Ghostbusters, over so many different things. And to be like in this world, within the universe, I like to bring everybody along for the ride. And so, I would say for all those folks online, come find me, come chat with me. I don't know if you guys have noticed, I respond to almost every single person who messages me online, which is, I think I'm about to be in the Guinness Book of World Records for that. But, I really do. I try to respond to everybody. I try to say hi to everyone and have an interaction and, make this a big sort of campfire where we can all sit around and tell stories and do, be on this journey together. So, I would say find me on Instagram, Michael_Nathanson, and, my Twitter is M_Nathanson1. And, yeah, come say hi.
And obviously that's how we first interacted. I just, an innocent tweet about you coming to a convention with Amber, in fact, had been announced in the last couple of weeks. And that's how this all kicked off. So thank you very much for coming on. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
You've been our first Marvel cast member interview. So we're very happy with that, and just wanted to.
I hope I broke the mold in a good way.
Yeah, you certainly did. It's been absolutely fantastic. So, and as you say, you've got something in the pipeline with Marvel. Anytime you're welcome back on the show. So, just let us know.
Totally. Thanks, guys. It's really been a pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yep, and Tony, thank you for joining us for this interview. A couple of great questions inserted in there as well. So thank you to both of you. Thank you to all our listeners. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks with another episode.
This podcast is part of the After Dark Podcast.